Gaeilge Weekly is brought to you by Learn Irish Online. For way more shows, videos, podcasts, and courses for learning the language, head to learnirishonline.com or patreon.com/learnirishonline.
You've been the best of times, you walk me through my darkest days. Why must I turn around? I ask myself. This just ain't fair, so hard to bear. I'm not really sure these days. You walk away, you don't
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to it. Madsanwa, Strononama. How are we all doing? Cunas Tom Woods on Tachtan Show this week. Hope everything is going well for you in your life. Hope the week is going smoothly. Tasulam gul gachrod egdol gama latsa ila hill. Agus gul on Tachtan Show egdol gama. And a big thank you as always for tuning in to Gaeilge Weekly. Gurmila Magav Marskanach as tune all shock wig Gaeilge Weekly. You're now listening to episode number 103, the bilingual, otherwise known as the BHFAD Níos Simplí version. So thought to anish ag éisteacht lagrán iver céadas a trí an lagan dácheangach no freshen marglítar gomininic an lagan BHFAD Níos Simplí, as it's often called. All is good here in Seville. I report to you from, I'm sure you won't be surprised, Tomakinsa, not my Intasert, from a very, very hot Seville this Tuesday afternoon. To make large slat on so o Seville Slona an Anate on show Seville as a record. It's probably about 38, 39, but to hit 41, if not 42, later on the day by Mitsig Bula Carcahain, Carcado, Nis Janie Salah. I saw a few reports actually. My dad was texting me even. Saying he heard about the heat wave, who'll say Fuin Ton Chassa on show Seville. Well, ní one on show Seville, not only here in Seville, but around Europe. It seems to have made the news back at home, as it tends to do once or twice throughout the summer. Tá cuma ghúil sénis sa nuacht a rash in Éireann, mar a bhíonn said ag an or nó go éire an tairí, gach blin. And it's not just this week, it's been like that in Seville. It's pretty much for the last month. Le mi anús, or certainly over the last 2 or 3 weeks, like caiiciis no trí seachtain anús tá sé cosúil le sin. It's like that. So basically the heat you normally get in August here, but we're getting it a lot earlier this year. Thomas fall an aimster sin ó bhfad níos luatha I mlíne. But as was said over the last few weeks, because I often start the podcast chatting a little bit about the weather and how hot it is here, gomininic bí mig tosu on fud cry leg lauert faoin aimsir, agus cécóh che, agus atá sé anseo there's much bigger problems in the world. Tá faibanna ó bhfad níos mó ag daoine tifriúla timpeall on down. But all is good apart from that. A bit disappointed about the results at the weekends. Beagney bortha stocha no vi beagney zima madra leis an thura ag an deir seachtainna. The result at the weekend, that result of course being Galway losing to Meath. Gailliamh ag Cailú an sin in I chun na me. I really did not think it was going to happen. You can't make Rouse on Tarlu. I thought what'll happen is what always happens with Galway. On Rud a Harloy. By an rud igoni no le Janie Arenos tá sé tarlu with le Gailliamh recently anyway. It's been happening with Galway in the Gaelic football, so fel Gaelach, and that is that we won't play very well, but we'll end up winning at the ends. Neil Mud son immer skama ach an sin sajera Thomas hon on bua all, but in the end we had the worst of both worlds. We didn't win and we didn't play very well at all. Near Vuimuds agus near Murns skama ach an erid. So disappointing, I really thought, and I think I spoke about this actually on the podcast a few months ago. Cheapam Grameig Lauertry show in Bud Creila Cúpla Miohin. I really thought this might be the year for Galway. Cheapme chance Emilina Gmaisha shot Marin Vleen, especially after last year in 2022, getting to those two finals, maybe just a bit too young, but just Bíoghanín Roog. Didn't quite have the experience near on Tachyagan, but it turns out we just weren't good enough. So Zera to Chomer to snack roundwards for once, who knows, might even be the end of Pork Joyce's time in charge of Galway. Shanskamai Shishin, Mar Zera Ray Pork Joyce, no Gugurhi Shishin, Creach Le Ray Pork Joyce. le for na Gaeilge a fan go bhheicimiid. Let's wait and see. I'm sure they'll come out over the next few weeks or months or possibly even at Christmas when they make a lot of those decisions by sin. Éisteacht amach na seachtaí seo, na mína seo nó beidir fiú ag an nullag nó ag deireadh na bliana when they make these decisions. They're eventually Déanta na Kinsey. So, but I watched all four of the quarterfinals actually the weekend. I've got much more into Gaelic football this year. Tá mé gairí bhád níos gafa leis an Gaeilge in Molina. You know, sometimes it can be tough to follow, obviously, when you're living abroad, or into being said, Bígí Zachar, chun leanúint nar atá tú I do chonaí thar lear. But nowadays with GA Go, as much as it's annoying for people back home, it's great for people abroad. Tá sé iontach le haid daoine thar lear, because you can see every game basically if you pay your subscription. Má tá sin tú sad, if you have a subscription, tá tú an íoc, or tá tú an gach cluiche go leisce eáil. So watched all four games. Actually watched them instead of at home. Watched them at the one Irish bar we have here in Seville. We only have one. Ní like Tach Torvin Éireannach Owan Agin anseo is Seville, and I don't go there too often because ultimately that's not why I'm living in Seville. And it's not. It's an okay Irish bar. It's not the best in the world. It's not the worst in the world. It's just, you know, that's just soch ma. Níl sé mar an Tach Torvin Éireannach is far down. Ach níl sé mar an chian is massa ach an aird. So went there on Saturday with one of friends and then a different friend on Sunday to watch the two quarterfinals rather on Saturday, and then the next two on Sunday. So on dá chluiche Ceathraí Ceannais an Saturn agus an dá cheanella an Domhnach. And the Galway game was by far and away the worst of the four. Dumsa for me at least. Bhí an chluiche le Gaeilge agus chun na mí gan out an cean is massa as gach cluiche ag an deir seachtainna. So I wouldn't say my interest is gone in the All-Ireland. I'll watch the semis and the final and look forward to seeing it, but definitely my interest has decreased gan out tá laidú tagcha anis mo chuid sima sa chraibh Molina. But it was a good weekend. It was nice to go there. And yeah, as I've said before in the podcast, you know, imagine living abroad 20, 30 years ago with Sauli, like a vet I do chonaí thar lear, fithe nó circa bliain ó hin, like trying to keep up with something like that with the championship, for example, would be so much trickier. I mean, you would have had to you couldn't even listen on radio. You would just have to, especially pre-internet, if we're talking early 90s, like Tuesday, I guess you would just have to phone someone home that evening and see who won, and you wouldn't know anything about the game. Ní bheith aon rud ar ról sagad faoin gléithe, and even calling home from Spain might be fairly tricky. If you, you know, a bheith chur gléach ar den ag an rasin éireann ón Spáin, seans go méid sé sin sách Dakar. So I know I'm very lucky, I think, to live in this generation. As I often say, you know, people give out about this generation and different things happening in the world. Bíonn daoine gearán ag sig tuairt amach faoi rudaí difriúla ar siúl timpeall down, and as horrible as some of those things are, there's also brilliant things happening, and so cool to be able to come out here to Spain and, you know, work a job that's connected still to the Irish language of a gulper, a bust, fós ceangailsa, less an Gaeilge, and at the same time, agus agan an céanna to be able to keep up with everything going on back home, such as watching the Gaelic, for example, or watching, if I want to watch the Tommy Tiernan show or whatever it might be, or be listening to the Independent Sports podcast that I Gaeilge leis on Budcrail Independent Sport, which is really good. I only got into it the last few weeks with Joe Malloy and a few others. Joe Malloy, agus cúpla Danella, Dan McDonald, who's a really good soccer journalist back in Ireland. Ira short soccer, iontucht Darvan Dan McDonald is probably the best there is in Ireland. So that's nice. I try not to, you know, Irishify my life too much. Nimé Giri Goul Mahale Ro Éireannach is loca, because, you know, I'm living in Spain. I like speaking that language as much as possible here. So even an Tangalarts Covminic Mars Fader on so, and I like, you know, rather than going to touristy spots here, going to local spots, eating again at the times, not just only eating the things that people here eat, but also eating at the times, you know, having lunch at 2 or 3, having dinner at 9 or 10, again on loan on sin ag dó no 3, on sin ag hit dinner beds ag an ní no it's I prefer that rather than just having basically my Irish life and it just so happens to be somewhere where it's sunny, you know, not a lán daoine beds a lán éir ag a hain gotí an Spáin no a hagan an seo gotí an Spáin that come here to Spain agus just being on sale Zurich mar an ggéine acub mar a bhí in Éireann. They have the exact same life as they in Ireland, but they just do everything where it's somewhere sunny. Bíonn stig déanú gacrad áit éigen, you know, I will say, no, tá sé beagán ní screen vera is socha. So that's always important to me. But yeah, a bit disappointing, I guess. for Gaeilge to be out, but still some good semi-finals. What is it? It's Kerry versus Tyrone. Kerry in Tyrone agus Dunlall an sin in Cunninmy, I think. I'm fairly sure. So that'll be good. But looking forward to that. And I actually love the way the calendar is now at the Gaelic football is even them on the way I bring on Féilire anish leis on Gaeilge. And I know a lot of people don't like it and a lot of people preferred when the All-Ireland final was in September for both codes. You know, Rivashaw and Nervy on Dachla Canish Ershil Mivion forward. But for me, the club is, you know, by far the most important thing. Of course, over the county, the club, because the club in a timple, the Tira Wadney Stavati, not Ain Rud Ershil Lesh and Gunday. So for me, that should take priority, and for club players, it's much better. I think, you know, I'm not playing for a club. Well, I'm not playing for a club in Ireland anyway. They make Gimmert Slane club in Air and Arena, so I can't really comment on it. Ni fed slum really Lauerts free, no tracht a yellow air. But it seems to me, and from my experience talking to people who are involved with it, it is much better for clubs. And I also love then you get this brilliant month or this 6-week period from like halfway through June until the end of July. So it's La Bealaigh 3 mi mehiv on sin Gadzera vi Ul. Those 6 weeks in the Ceisteacht and Shin are brilliant because you had preliminary quarters of hurling, preliminary quarters of the football, then quarters of the football, quarters of the hurlings, and the Cluiche Cabhrú Canish Safel on Shin the Cluiche Cabhrú Canish Sanamaniacht. Then the semis in the hurling, semis in the football, the Cluiche Lacanish on Shin Safel on Shin the Cluiche Lacanish Sanamaniacht, and then the two finals as well on Dachla Canish. So you get this brilliant 6-week period instead of it just being stretched across months, you know, from having the league in at the end of January all the way through until you could have, if you have a replay in the final in the old days, Mas Rudé grow at Immert Agat Lesh Unglehi Canish Rivershaw. That replay wouldn't happen until October, you know, and club players can't start until the winter then. Ni Fader Lesh na Himmery and Sin Lesh na Glumpana Immerts no Tosu on Crave start championship until October. And despite, in my opinion, them being the priority, Dumsa Tashids and Mar on Rud is Tavati agus na Himmery is Tavati the club players, and you know all county players are club players anyway. Gach den Gimmert lesh na Kundiha Tashids and Gimmert lesh na Glubana Arena. So for me, I prefer it, but I know there's, you know, arguments against it, and it's changing next year. Bish going a week or two later, I think. Tashigarhu Buganin on Sin Underlines Huganig Dul Bugani Stany. But I love the way it is because this 6-week period is brilliant, especially with the new rules in the football Goria. Lesh na really Canua Safel Gaeilge, which is the catchphrase of 2025. I think if you live in Ireland and you're a sports fan, everyone talking about the new rules and saying how great they are. Gach den egg Lords free. Na really Canua agus Ceisteanna agus Atashi no on Chuid Smaku Arinos, most of them at least. Speaking about being halfway through, there, ag Lord speaking in for you of La Bealaigh 3 mi mehiv mar hampla halfway through June and the kind of start of this cool period. I also noticed the other day that we're halfway through the year. Hug my fidara on La Hana, Gulmajanish La Bealaigh 3 on Lean. And it's crazy to think, I know it's such an Irish thing or typical thing every year to say, like, oh, isn't the year flying by? Nach bhfuil an bhliain ag dul go han tapi. But it really does feel like it is. Mohíonn sé cosú leis sin agus mohíonn sé go bhfuil an bhliain ag eitilt mar deir fá i mBéarla. It's flying, as you'd say in English. I think when I recorded the other two versions of the podcasts, nuair a hafad mé an Dnáthleagan eile san fud Craile inné. Yesterday on Monday I was recording this version on Tuesday, the other two on Monday. So on Da Chinella on Sin an Luan, August on Kian, so on March. So yesterday was the 30th of June. Yine mar on Strucula mi mehiv. And I suppose in terms of months, that's the last day of the first half of the year. Mads lesh na miana tashishin mar zera on Chéad Quids Denblin. But I think in terms of days, it's the 2nd of July is the kind of midday of the year. Mads lesh na lean that on Darla Mules. The day this is going out, actually on Spotify and all the other places, there's Spotify, Gnáthleagan. That's the kind of halfway points on Laugh Points and on Point to Laugh Bealaigh Den Blin. And I think it's always interesting at this time of year to kind of look back at how the first 6 months have gone, you know, in lots of different ways along Bally's or Frula, maybe in terms of progress you wanted to make with different stuff. Dul Hunkeen, a route to Igiri, agus a will to Igiri, Zainu, Le Ruddy to Frula. But as well as that, you know, thinking, okay, if I've, 6 months have gone and we're as close now to next Christmas or as close now to 2026 as we were to 2024, Thomas Cove Conger Knish, Le Gaeilge is fi sé ná mar Thomas ó Gaeilge fi cahir. Oh, kind of sometimes maybe jolts you into gear and kind of makes you wake up, the current say who beds are either go shocht bioganin, and you kind of realize, oh, after, if I want to do something, time is going by fast. I can't just let it pass me by. Ní féid se ligan stó just dul harm agus mise gone a bheith day in the morning show while I'm kind of not doing much here, or equally looking back at the first 6 months and saying, oh, I've made great progress and I'm really happy with X, Y, or Z. My ansasta X, Y, or Z, and I need to keep on going like this. And if I get this much done in 6 months, think over next 6 months how much I could do. Civéad ó bhfuil mé in an déanú. So actually, I probably spoke about this on the first podcast of the year. Seans má gra mé ag labhairt faoi seo ar an géad aggrons in Leath. I probably took the easier way out and just spoke about the, sometimes it's tough with this podcast, or that that's exactly leis an podcast show. It's not, I think I'm better at it now. Ceapan go say, or go miss níos fearr ega anish. But I remember before, it used to be tough sometimes kind of coming up with something to speak about every week. We said Zachar or into like Zach Susler Rudagan, hun Lauert's week got shocked. And that's why sometimes on the podcast, I'll just talk about what I did on the weekend, or in there in Bud Creala, just be make Lauert's Fuin Rud a riname egg on their Shatana, because it's fresh in my mind as I record this on Monday and also on Tuesday. Marvin me egg tafadu Bud Creala show, Aaron Loon, agus Aaron Morch. Say or e ma insin. So it's an easy thing to speak about. Is rud éasca hun Lauert's foi. But so definitely thinking back to January, even without going back and checking, I'm sure I must have spoken about what my goals and what my ideas for 2025 are. Kinsa, if you gone dollar-ash agus éisteacht leis tá mé kinsa ar an géad lagan or an géad agron gom leis geilt an Fud Creala im Lína bhí mé Lauert's foi ma aimimena done Leath agus my sprochanna. So my aims and goals for the year, it definitely would have been the obvious thing to do, which I'll always take that if I can, which is kind of like what I'm doing today as well, talking about the halfway points of the year. Ag Lauert's Fuin Leath Fuin Sanon Pointa Lat Bealaigh Zen Leath. So I think on the first episode of the year, I talked a little bit about my different goals, different things I wanted to do, and different intentions, I guess. I like that word intentions, Matlam and Fuckelchin intentions, rather than kind of, okay, I want to do this, whatever. I want to be able to do 100 push-ups a day. I want to go to Portugal for a week, and real binary stuff. Sometimes just more of this or less of this, which, it can be easy then to not do it if it's not a binary thing, because there's less pressure. Níl maid's brew céine, and it's tougher to measure it. Tá sé níos deachar a vasu, I guess. But in general, I like that kind of stuff of, let's say, less time on the phone. Níos luama ar an phone, more time in Ireland. Níos muama in air, and whatever kind of intentions or general stuff, as opposed to sometimes very black and white stuff. So it's ruddy at the answer stuff agus bon igoni is ruddy binary merit to in mBéarla, as you say in English, kind of binary things. So I actually have my list down here. I normally write this the week in between Christmas Day and New Year's Day or New Year's Eve. So taking all beam ag scríb on list the show gach blian it's your lord nullig agus iha chin blina. And yeah, I have about 15 or 20 things down most years, such as this year, Tartar Kuig, Rudseg, no Fihin, no Pitcher, small, maybe even more things are in down Ruddy, Screefishies that I want to do this year. So I think it can be good. A lot of people with, I suppose, New Year's resolutions, not that these are really resolutions, ni me grogul sheets and or going like keen suck, Cosul, na Rune, na Havlina. But with a lot of Rune na Havlina with New Year's resolutions, sometimes these is just after the 5th or 6th of January or 15th or whatever it is, on Chugalad, no on Kugalad Zeg to Vienna. It's very easy to just forget them and kind of think, okay, well, that didn't work, or I'm kind of doing this or whatever, become very vague about them. So I think it's sometimes good to look back as well around this time of year, hun fake and seer heart Eranam so Leath, and kind of say, okay, what's gone well, what hasn't gone well. Oh, remember, I do want to do that this year, so I must get on with it if I haven't done it yet. Caith me, ní caith me, still chur, defer, or I don't have to rush myself, but kind of have to at some point do it, and just to remind myself, hun stocha a chur gwivna dom freshen, madra leshin. And that I want to do it and then get around to it at some point. It's going to make on a yenoig point again, but I do have to actively sit down and do it at some point. Good example, that is one of the things when this is I want to learn how to write Clo Gaeilge. Clo Gaeilge is the old style Irish script that was used, still used in different places in the country, but normally used on specific things like monuments now, but really they stopped using it stopu. So called new sods leis an gló Gaeilge. A lot of it was to do with the introduction of typewriters, that unless you had, for example, a Gaeilge keyboard, mBéarla, as Gaeilge, then you wouldn't be able to actually write anything out. So it's like the old S and T and all these different letters that you often see, kind of a bastardized version of it sometimes in text like crackceol agus all on Irish pubs, but it's kind of more difficult to read actually, the original one. So look up Cló Gaeilge if you want to find a more CLO fada, and then Gaeilge Gaelach for how it looked, but most people will know how it looks. But I want to learn how to write that and be able to write that kind of fluently without stopping, without kind of having to think of it, so I can write it almost as good as I can write Irish now. Unas go mai and on scríb an level céine nó chomh leis an gcuí a bhfuil mé in an gnáthleagan nó Gaeilge nua aimsrithe a scríb inis. The spelling and all that's pretty much the same, just the H, there's no H, you use a dot instead. First ní léon H nó séú úsáids an tú nó úsáidster dash nó punk an sin os chóir. So mar má dearan tú mar hampla má chara leis an CH tá sé C an sin punk os cion an C, so a little dash above the C. Agus an sin the rest of it's spelled the same, so A-R-A. So to be gur sin ólam ach mar hampla, I haven't spent a single second on it, níl few second cuts agam mar sin, but I always kind of thought that would be for one during the summer where things are quieter here in Seville, sin rud le hain Sarah nor tá rudí níos ciúna an seo Seville, so I will get around to that and do that hopefully at some point over the next few weeks and months. Licuna sé, bain chance agam buganí náma a chahu sin I miúil mí lúnasa nó na míana seo, na míana os mo chóir, the months kind of in front of me anyway. But so the big kind of 2 or 3 that I'll speak about that I had written down. Cean sanna nó cúpla cean sanna cín is mó a bhí scrífa sí sagam. Now, firstly, Italian. So if you listen to the podcast or have been listening to the podcast over the last year or so, must really go to éisteacht leis an podcréile le Gaeilge Weekly le bliain anús. You'll know that I'm learning Italian by sugah goal me ag fólam na hadalas, and I really wanted to give it a big push this year. Vi me geri, brew more a hort though in Molina, because I guess, last year I was doing it, but it was always just meant to be a hobby, do a bit of practice when I can, but no real big pressure gone in, so I brew more in a way in rud mar sin. But this year I really wanted to focus in on it. In Molina, vi me really geri zero stock air, and to be able to do a lot of work at it. Bhean a lot ibre a chur isteach air. And so I'm really happy with how that's gone so far. Tá mé an sásta leis an gcuí rá sé sin go dtí seo, weekly, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. Listen, I'm not going to be living in Italy anytime soon. Ní bhaid mé mo chónaí san Idal ein lua, so it's not a big thing. There's no huge practical use to it in my life at this moment, apart from when I'm in Italy. Seachas nar tá mé san Idal, and suppose it helps me a bit with certain things in Spanish, because the two are so similar. Or in the Korean, say bioganí lum le cúpla rud sa Spanish, marial goil an dá theanga cómhcasú le céile, and because they're in the same family, marial goil siad sa chlán, céile sa chlán, teangólaíochta, céine the same linguistic family, let's say. And it's been really good. I mean, I had my trip to Italy for 2 weeks at the end of March. Bhí an turas agam go dtí in Idal ag zera mí mórta. So that was really good to have 2 weeks where I was almost thinking in Italian by the end of it. Bhí me beagnach ag smaoinmh tríd an dális an sin ag zera an hers. And that was really nice, and to be able to properly use it and learn a lot of stuff I couldn't learn in my classes here in Seville. Alan ruddy ólam nach méach mé an án fólam an seo I marangana is Seville, and I'm really happy that I found 2 really good teachers here in Seville. Tá mé an sásta goil mé éisteacht bhirt sa únsaí an a watha an seo is Seville freshen, and they've really helped me, tá siad san thréis cabhrú gomórlam, and the way we do the lessons are so simple, and chuí a dhéanaan muds na ceachtainna tá siad có simplí. We just sit down, see mud cheese for an hour and just chat away, have a coffee and just catch up basically for an hour. Being with 6 and Shane Glart or a click, and there's no major grammar drills or anything like that, or worksheets. Níl Bealaigh no, and níl grammar drills, no, Alan ruddy modulation grammar. Look, just when something comes up, a mistake or whatever, something I don't understand in terms of the grammar, we tackle that for Lynn, and she explains it a bit, and then we move on from there. Being Shisha no Cean sa Marúnsaí, one of my teachers anyway, me níon seed on real dumb. Agus, normally you can copy it over from Spanish pretty easily, tatu an tastrú a dhéanú sách éasca ón Spanish, so I've a fairly good grasp of Spanish at this point after 4 years here. Tá mé sách chomprach leis an Spanish inis tar éis ceithre bliana an seo. So thankfully that's not too challenging, and I suppose I get languages because I work in languages. I understand them quite well. Bí man an tangacha hiiscint agus an óilíocht tíobh here to tangacha or an tangóilíocht, the science behind languages. In other words, tangóilíocht, which is a nice word in Irish because it's the science of languages. In other words, in English, it is the translation for linguistics. So that's going really well. I did find some problems with it, as always. One of the big problems, if one is tougher in Spanish, that's jacker non-Spanish gone out. Dom Reinos for me. Anyway, and also when I was practicing a lot the 2 months before my trip, because I really wanted to have a good level going over to Italy, or to have a better level anyway, on level níos fearr of agam riv dul go dtí idal, I found it really kind of put in on my Spanish. I'm thinking in Irish now, but I really had a bit of a negative effect on my Spanish during that time. Fi beidir tuncar dúilteach agus bhí sé chusteach mo chuid Spáinische ré an tréimh se sin, because I was Italian was coming to me when I wanted to speak Spanish. Bhí na dála sig teacht thugam nuair bhí mise ag éirí an Spanish a labhairt. So that was kind of tricky, and I didn't like the feeling of not feeling comfortable speaking Spanish here and not feeling confident speaking Spanish here like I would have before. And so ní raibh mé chomh muíneach an sin leis an Spanish because it was getting mixed up with Italian in my mind. Bhí mé ag áirí beagnaíonn trína céile agus measca sús is dócha idir an dá theanga. So because of that, what I've done now since my trip to Italy, my thuras go dtí an Nidal agus mise tar éis fill ras after returning at the start of April, tar éis fill ras ag tús fi Aibron. What I'm doing now is actually just doing my 2 lessons a week and then no other Italian during the week. I don't watch anything, I don't listen to anything, I don't read anything. I wouldn't recommend that for learning a language, like nimé hon é sin a wula, hon sanga a olam, but it's just to get the balance right. So I'm just keeping up my Italian for the time being, not really looking to improve it massively. Nimé really géirí and nimé ag te inuireacht is dócha hon feabhas ulmhór a chur mo chuid idálaise, but rather almost like a boxer or something who stays fishing between camps, cosúla darnálaí agus bíonn sé is dócha chuinneálachtlaí idir campana agus tridsanna tir friúla, so keeping fish in between different camps. But then when he has the camp, when he has the date for his fight 2 months before his fight or my next trip to Italy, an dábhí an sin rih beidir an chéad thurasella a bhaid agam go dtí an idal, then I'll really focus in and do a lot and just take the bit of confusion between the Spanish and the Italian and take it on the chest, I guess. So yeah, really happy with that so far. And again, it's nice that I think sometimes with these things you can always look at, well, I want to do X because I want to do Y. Tá mé géirí X a dhéanamh mar tá mé géirí Y a dhéanamh. So for example, I want to learn Italian, so one day if I want to move to Italy I can, or I can meet different people from Italy and I can think the languages more. And ultimately, I like speaking Italian. I like speaking in different languages. It's not an tanga difriúla a labhairt. So for me, just go and do my 2 lessons here in Seville and speaking Italian for an hour, ag déanam mo gá ceacht in I na seachtainna, 2 lessons per week. Agus just ag labhairt san na dális or clig gach ceann. So speaking in Italian for an hour for each one. That's where I get the enjoyment. I don't necessarily need, another trip to Italy or another this, that, or the other, or this certificate B2 or C1 or whatever. No, I'm just happy doing the thing itself and I get my enjoyment from that. Sometimes I think that's important, orintha. Ceapan go to sin tábhacht, especially with social media nowadays. Maybe it's not social media, maybe it's just my generation. Beidir ní bhaineann sé leis na mion ho síalta, beidir go sin níos mó le ma chlún hain. And maybe it's not even my generation. Chance nach muineann sé le ma chlún hain. But I think that thing of, ceapan rud sin, well, sad, of instead of always looking for X for Y for Z, actually just enjoying the thing in front of you and living in today, bheith an so inniu agus ag buint taitnimh an rud díreach os the chur directly in front of you. So trying to keep that in mind with all these goals, not just the Italian. My second one on my list as well, and I suppose the ones top of the list naturally are the biggest ones because they're the ones I would have thought of first. Na cín answer war my list tá siad san mar na cín is tábhachtaí nó na cín is mó dig an because they're the first ones tá siad san mar na céad cín a cheap mé nó a smuoine mai fuhu. And second one here is stint just in English, so a time period stint níos fuide in éireann a chathú Megan. So to spend a kind of longer stint in Ireland at some point. My plan was, over the last few years, I normally go back to Ireland from Spain. Timarash, Gahéran, on Spawn. Take an 3 or in Ina Blina 3 times during the year, maybe 4 if there's something else going on, if there's a concert or whatever, if I have to go back. Malta or Dullarash for some reason. But in general, I only go back around 3 times a year, once in April, once end of the summer, and then once at Christmas, or one in my Eibron. I've had Cúig for 5 days normally, 5 days again, the end of summer or September, etc. An Thowry, no beds are me Bhean Fover, or fra Gumlashkel Cúig Arish, and then again 5 or 6 days, about a week, let's say, at Christmas, Shockton, Heart, or Omnalig. But it's not that much, 365 days in the year. And I'm only there maybe 2 weeks in total, or was previously. Ní raibh in Sinach Beidir Caiicish, trí de Streets, Iritna Blina, ní an mór, sin, tríchéad. It's a Seasca Cúig law, gach blian, 365 days per year when you break it down like that, and probably in Spain for 320, 330 of those, and just to spawn. Trícéad is a fiche, Dena leichen the shin, trícéad is trocha, no heart or shin. So I guess because of that, I'm like, well, I want to spend more time there. I like being back in Ireland, and as time goes on, I know more people in Ireland, and because you can get a bit disconnected. A lot of my school friends wouldn't live in Ireland anymore. They live abroad, the lands in the chords of Iagam. Aaron Skull, Neil Sheedson in Agoni, Nismo, in Aaron Tosheedson in Agoni, Harlar, they're living abroad. And yeah, I suppose a lot of the people I know in Ireland now are people I met in Seville. Actually, Lance and Heranig, I will atna algam who inis in Aaron, like Vul me low and shot Seville, whether they were here on holidays or most of them just came here to live for a year, 6 months, 2 years, or in Barcelona, either in Barcelona, few nervime on Chin. So and they've moved back home now to Kilkenny or to Mayo or to Dublin, Mayo, Kilkenny, Lochleah, and Galway, wherever it might be. And so it's nice now when I'm back, actually, I can meet up with them. Búla leis na daoine sin, nor a bhíon me arash. So, and obviously to see my family, and just in general, as time goes on, I enjoy more. Maybe it's cause to be open and honest, because I don't mind talking about money. It's cumulum for you ag larts foin argad. I am, making more money now than I would have 2 or 3 years ago. So it's very hard for me to afford things in Ireland a few years ago. Vi see an Zacharton hun on made sin argads of agam hun ruddy a yenu in Ireland to do things in Ireland. Even, think how much a night out costs you in Ireland, or a dinner or whatever on maids a thought dinner anish in Éireann no dulamach I humach. But now because I'm earning more money and my business is doing better, Marial goal me ag til in East Margaret, so agus Marial goal me chno ag tin in East Far. When I go back and kind of enjoy myself, and I have enough money to actually live the Irish life as opposed to the Spanish life for the week or two that I'm back. So because of that, I am trying to spend more time. So I was thinking of doing a big stint in a month without leaving in Ireland for me, swinny for beds or me umlon a yenov in Éireann in Molina. What I'm actually going to do, or what I am doing on road that will make Janov, is still go back 3 times during the year, but instead of going back for a month, or equally instead of going back like 5 or 6 days in Archdolarash Cúig no sé Shockton like I used to, mar rinne me Rivishaw, actually go back for about 10 days, or even sometimes up to 2 weeks each time I'm back. So I was there 10 days at Christmas, 10 days in April, Zetla, I got Nullig, Zetla, me Eibron, and every time I go back and enjoy more, gachor a hain me rash, but I'm ní small tatnavas. So really happy with that, and want to do more of that going forward as well. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, more time in Ireland I think is overall a good thing. And also, and I'll wrap it up on this point, another 2 things on my list that connect to that. Gá rodella my list the Ceangailte leis sin. One of them is Northern Ireland, to go up to Northern Ireland, or the north of Ireland, if you want to call it that. So Dul Susan Shin Gatushkart na Héireann, because I've only spent, and I'm embarrassed to say, Tonnoir or Lorá, but I think like a lot of people in the south, Cosula Lawn, Dini Sujashkart, especially people who don't live particularly close to the border, Goria Dini, Knockwill in Argoni, Saw Hungruk, Duntroran. I say that, it's still only 2.5 hours, even less, I think, to the border from my house in Galway. Jeremy Shinach, Fos Nishak Gá or Galet, really, Omachak, Igunne, Nagalifa, Gati and Troran. But I've only spent 2 days of my whole life out of, I don't know how many days I've been alive, 15,000 or something maybe. Nila Gá La Katagum, Idushkart na Héireann. And it was in Fermanagh and Tyrone, which, as most people will know, Marvai, well, maybe not a lot of people will know it, but some people will know Bias Egg, Dini Egan. That's the kind of most, let's say, Catholic areas or nationalist areas in Northern Ireland. It's not the same as going to East Belfast or parts of Derry and so on. Níos le dulga, áit an aigen na dtíre or nira, beartam rá, as I should say, or East Belfast, so Orher, Vale Fersta, and so on. I think which would also be an interesting experience, and especially as someone really interested in history and 20th century history and Irish history, mar duine aigen bhfuil an sim agam sa star na héireann is star an fiú híis chomh. I would love to, that's another thing on my list is tied into it, is learn more about the Troubles and also the famine. Not that that's directly, well, of course it's connected to Northern Ireland, but there was no Northern Ireland at the time. Ní rá é náit cosúil le túisceart na héireann ag an Gurt the Mór, the famine in the 1800s, 1845 was it? Oxide Carcacúg, Capam. So I would like to learn more about those things because even though I studied 20th century Irish history at school, Ciganearna me Stadzer, Lán Stadzer, a lot of study on star sa fiú híis in Éireann. We didn't do the Troubles, and we didn't do then what is obviously 19th century history on sin star some níu híis jeig in Ireland, which is the famine, principally as I suppose the main event and the main tragedy on Príomh-Thragóideags and Príomh-Rud a Harla in Éireann ire na híise sin during that age or during that century, as we say in English. So that brings me to my plans for the summer. So inis tá mé in an láirt faoi my plan don summer, which still aren't finalised. I'm still not fully sure what I'm going to be doing in my céad fan gínsa go leiscail cad a bhaid me ag déanú, but my rough plan is at the end of this month ag deire na míosa seo to be in Belfast for a few days for the Belfast Tradfest. So an plan atá ná a bheith I Méal Fersta ar feadh cúpla lá don Tradfest atá ar siúil I Méal Fersta at the end of this month ag deire na míosa sure, so probably going to fly from Farrow to Belfast because you can't fly Seville to Belfast. Ní féidir leat dul ó Seville go Belfast so tá mé honna sinna dhéanam. Farrow go Belfast on Gaeilge at the end of this month, probably 26th, 27th. Get to Belfast, spend a few days there with my friends. Again, a lot of friends I met here in Seville along the Corsa ó bhfuil mé low an seo is Seville. And then after that, head back down to Galway and spend a week or two there with family and friends and all that. So seachtain nó cho a cathú híos in Aliamh. But I'm also planning a little trip to Kerry as well to see a friend in there. Tá mé ag planal thuirsaigh an Curí chun ní seachtain ach chun deir seachtainna a chathú an sin le cara agam I gunna Curí. So yeah, that is pretty much it. And looking forward to doing those things. And again, nice to look at these goals instead of just look at them for the first few days of the year. And to forget about them and not do them. Gán just bheith fécinn sé na aimimena seo an chéad cúpla lá den bhliain agus an sin dearmid a dhéanamh arthú. It's nice to actually go, oh, no, I'll actually, look back at them again throughout the year, as I have been doing. Mar a rinne mé go dtí seo and say, okay, more of that, less of that. That one I actually don't want to do. I tried it and realised it's not for me. Rinne mé iirecht leis sin gceann sin agus go mé fideara. It's not for me. And, sunken cost fallacy and all that of, well, cut your losses. It doesn't matter if you spent a bit of money on something or you put a lot of time aside for something specific. If it's not going well, maybe sometimes better to leave it and do something else that you'll enjoy. Orintha tá sin níos fearr chun. Yeah, just éasca agus the chuid a chathú mar tá the chuid tábhachtach. Your time is a priority and important chun the chuid a chathú ar rud éigean of bhain fá níos mó taitneamh that you would enjoy more. So that's it, guys. I think for this week, Sinead, don Sachtan Show. As always, if you want way more stuff for learning the language, head to learnirishonline.com or patreon.com/learnirishonline. Take a learnirishonline.com. No, patreon.com/learnirishonline. Honna vet the wall air Learn Irish Online to be a member at Learn Irish Online or to sign up for one of our courses on Shinisus like Jan se na Corsi atá agin. Big thank you as always for listening to the show. Gurmí na magah Mars nach as a vegetation clash on show. And I will speak to you guys, hopefully, with help of God, next week. Licuna J, by making Lauert live Arish on Sachtan Shogun. Goodbye and God bless. Slán agus Banach. Have a good one.